You're listening to Now I've Heard Everything. Interviews from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s with voices from the past.
It must be 0.001% of bands actually make money off of their record sales. Over the course of our career, we sold close to 2 million records, and we never saw one dime from the sale of records.
Semisonic drummer Jacob Slichter. Today on Now I've Heard Everything. I'm Bill Thompson. Well, if you want to know what it's like to be a rock star, just ask one. But you're not likely to get a more honest answer than you will from Jacob Slichter, drummer for the band Semisonic. Slichter's 2004 book, which was called So You Want to Be a Rock and Roll Star, was widely praised for its frank, some would say brutally honest assessment of the music industry. Semisonic was formed in 1995, and over the next decade, they saw the good and the bad and the really, really ugly of the music business. So Jake and I talked about his book one fine midsummer day. So here now from 2004, Jacob Slichter. This is not, I gather, intended as a how-to.
No. It might even be considered a how not to.
We should also point out maybe initially that this is not the official Semisonic story. This is your story, right?
Yeah, it's my story. When I wrote the book, I was very aware of the fact that most people are not going to know who Semisonic is. They certainly won't know who I am. What I wanted to do was to give them an inside look at the music, at the whole journey through the music business, including being a performer on stage, experiencing stage fright, encountering record executives for the first time, being flown out to Los Angeles to be wined and dined by the bigwigs, and making records in a studio, photo shoots, getting your song on the radio, what are record contracts like, all that stuff, all the way from being a nobody in front of, a small crowd at a small bar in Minneapolis to, stadiums full of people when you have a hit song.
You came to it a little bit later than most, didn't you?
I did. I was in my early 30s when I got into the band with my bandmates, Dan and John. The two of them had some good success as musicians. They were in a band called Trip Shakespeare that was on A&M Records. And they were really well known around the Midwest and were sort of legends in Minneapolis. So from the very beginning, we had a lot of people at our shows, which actually made it all the more sort of trying for me, and it made the learning curve all the steeper because of the fact that things went a lot faster with our band than they would have for most bands just starting out.
But also it seems that there were many points in the book in which you seemed to be like exchanging glances with them to try to figure out what they know that you don't know yet. And maybe it had helped you that you had somebody who'd been through some of this before.
It absolutely helped. I mean, when I found out about record contracts from them, and I knew nothing about record contracts. I had sort of vague ideas, and the vague ideas I had were of two sorts. One is that rock stars get rich and live in big mansions, and then the other idea I had was, well, rock stars don't get anything. They get, screwed, and they end up with nothing. So Dan and John described how the record contracts are structured. And sure enough, the record contract part of it, you really, I don't know, it must be 0.001% of bands actually make money off of their record sales. Over the course of our career, we sold close to 2 million records, and we never saw one dime from the sale of records. Where we actually ended up making some money was on the songs getting on the radio, performance royalties. So and also the mechanical royalties for the songs. So it's a tricky business. It's actually so tricky that as I sat down to write the book, I had to do a lot more research to really nail down all these ins and outs of these various dealings.
But when Hollywood gets their hands on a story like this, they make it look, even if they're trying to make it look hard, they still end up making it look easy. You guys get some guys together in a garage. In a week, you're playing at a club. Another week, you're playing in a huge club. In another week, you get a recording contract. In another 2 weeks, you're a major star. Another 5 weeks, you're rich. And then 5 weeks after that, you're broke and hooked on cocaine again. But it's just, it looks very easy.
Yeah, because it happens in the movies, it happens in 90 minutes. I think they need Ken Burns to make one of his 50-hour documentaries about being in a rock band. Then that might be a more realistic picture of how slow it can feel.
It seems like there's a lot of waiting going on.
There is a lot of hurry up and wait. And that certainly does sort of wear you down, and it's in those moments when you're waiting on the tour bus or waiting in an airport or in a hotel lobby that it was in those moments that I found myself on the cell phone calling up our manager, finding out how is our chart position, how is our record selling, obsessing about all the things that my two bandmates, being experienced, knew better than to worry about. So if I had to do the whole thing over again, I think I'd keep that cell phone put away in my bag and read a book, listen to some music, and enjoy life a little more.
I have a lot of authors come in here, and the first thing they want is look me up on Amazon. They see, what's my sales rank on Amazon?
Don't think I haven't sprained my wrist in the past couple of weeks since my book came out.
Well, where did I read you? I think it may have been on your own website that I saw you talking about the difference between getting a book contract versus getting a recording contract. You got a book contract in less than a week, I gather.
Yeah, it was the book proposals went out on a Thursday afternoon, and by Monday noon, I had a book deal. I mean, that's in the record business. It can take years to get a record deal from the time your first tape goes out to the first record company. So I think part of the reason is that record deals involve so much more money than books. An author, for instance, is not going to make a video of himself reading his book. He doesn't have to pay bookstores to carry his book like you do have to do with radio stations. The actual creation of a book is just typing on a computer. You don't have to rent out hundreds of thousands of dollars of studio time and producers' fees and mixers' fees. So the scale of money is just so much smaller that I think book companies can probably afford to be a lot more quick on the draw than a record company can.
Plus, you know how many books it takes to be a New York Times bestseller?
No.
70,000.
Yeah. If your record sells 70,000, you are so fired.
I was going to say, I mean, you have to sell basically at least 1 million records to be considered a modest success. And if you sell 1 million books, you're basically Stephen King.
Right. Yeah. Well, we sold, over 1 million records in the U.S. on our second record, Feeling Strangely Fine. And the response from the record company is, well, the next time, we can't do this the next time around. You guys got to do better. When we got our platinum records, it was almost like a funeral service. I mean, So that's another thing, if I had to do it all over again, I think I'd smile at when I received my platinum record.
Well, the other thing that the movies tend to do is to make it seem like you're just an artist. You want the world to hear your music. That's all you're interested in. And all this other, the money stuff and the producer stuff and the technical stuff. Oh, don't bother me. I just want to make my music. And it's not, your book really is very instructional on all the aspects of, certainly, yes, there is great music to be made, but you got to take care of the producers and the packagers and the radio stations. There's all this other stuff.
Well, yeah. I wanted it to be a very complete inventory of the experience. And, for me at least, I do care about do people think I dress weird? Do I look weird in that photograph? Are people going to hear the drums? Are they loud enough in the mix? I think about all that stuff, which, writing about it in the book, I, really exposed a lot of my own sort of obsession with fame and becoming a star and all that stuff. But that was always in the back of my mind when I grew up wanting to be a rock star. I didn't want to be. Part of wanting to be a rock star is to have all those other things that aren't the music.
I was just going to say, it's a dual desire, isn't it? Certainly you want to make music, you want people to hear your music, but at the same time, you want a nice house, you want a nice car, you want, to be able to jet around things, you enjoy the adoration of thousands of fans. It's two things that you want.
Well, especially after, running a copy machine for the 15 years after getting out of college or whatever it was. I was thinking, how long is this going to last? And can we make enough money for me to just sort of have made it and not have to sweat it out anymore?
Do you have regrets that you're not a superstar, that I didn't have to go through phalanxes of publicists to try to arrange an interview, and you'd come in a limousine with 14 bodyguards and things like that? I mean, do you miss that? Did you want that, and you regret that you don't have it?
Well, I don't regret not having to have a bunch of security guards and publicists. I mean, I'm sure I would love being as big a band as U2. To know that you had touched that many people would, really be special to me. Although I have to say that, our experience is pretty special, and I don't feel shortchanged in the slightest.
Oh, you were in the big leagues. There's no question about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just this again. Toward the end of the book, some of the stories you tell about the rubbing of the elbows and the meeting at the cocktails and things like this. Great stuff.
Yeah, we did some pretty high class hobnobbing. I mean, from the Grammy Awards to our various travels around the world. We met a lot of really cool, big stars, and when you walk up to Prince at the Beacon Theater and say, "Hey, man, I'm a big fan." I mean, you're still a fan. You're not a rock star. You're Prince's fan. And it's the same when you're walking around the Grammys. And I ended up in a half-hour conversation with Lionel Richie, and afterwards I thought, wow, I probably really embarrassed him by gushing about the fact that my high school funk band used to play a bunch of Commodores songs. But again, it's just a moment where I did find myself, pretty starstruck by a guy like Lionel Richie, who I don't think most people would think that a rock drummer would be interested in meeting. But
no, it's the personalities that come through. I mean, some people aren't exactly the way you expected them to be. Others are exactly the way you expected them to be. Things like that. Maybe your experience at the Billboard Music Awards was not exactly what you had expected it was going to be.
Well, that certainly wasn't. They pulled the plug on us halfway through our song, and the lights came on, and they announced to the 15,000 guests at the MGM Grand, "Thank you for attending the 1998 Billboard Awards." And all 15,000 of them, including Stevie Wonder, James Taylor, Carole King, and Bette Midler, and Lauryn Hill, and all these stars, got up and made their way to the exits as we stood on stage with our guitars and drums, looking like absolute fools.
Well, it should be pointed out they only did that because you were the very last performers, and the television broadcast had ended.
The television broadcast had ended and had gone over the time limit. So some guy in the truck, under pressure from his boss, just pulled the switch.
Did you ever get to see a tape of what it looked like to the folks at home? I mean,
no.
It probably didn't look as abrupt,
Well, the folks at home just saw the credits rolling as we played Closing Time, and then a cut to commercial. So they wouldn't have noticed anything.
There's probably some TV guy back in the trailer saying, "Hey, it looks pretty smooth there, Bob. Yeah, I'll just fade to black. Let's go on."
Yeah, well, it was more like, "Come on, we're 10 minutes over. Ready, go, off."
But I guess that's the blessing and the curse of having a song like Closing Time that is a logical show closer.
Oh yeah, we were asked. We turned down lots of requests for closing out shows with it, and baseball pitchers would be. The relief pitcher comes onto the mound, they play Closing Time, We talked to some guy who was a real estate salesman, flagged Dan in a hotel lobby and said, "Dude, they played your song at my sales conference. Closing Time. Get it?"
He was wearing a white belt, I'm guessing.
For sure, and white shoes. Yeah.
That's right. Is there such a bad thing about being known for one song?
Oh, no, I don't think so. Well, first of all, the Semisonic fans know us for a lot of songs.
True.
Other people just know us for one song. I mean, some of my favorite bands don't even have one hit. So I have no bad feelings about, if people say, "Oh, you're a one-hit wonder." I mean, maybe to them we are, and I can't change that. I'm a big fan of the Replacements. I'm a big fan of Big Star. Those great bands who never had a hit on the radio. I think they're actually better bands than Semisonic in certain respects. And so you just can't use your you can't get into the game of counting your hits or your record sales to measure what you did.
I mean, you've had a great ride.
Absolutely.
I mean, you've lived the dreams of millions of people.
I really did. And I mean, in spite of all the weird things about payola and record contracts and all that stuff that sounds so miserable and in many respects really is miserable. But if someone said to me, Jake, would you do it all over again? Oh, I absolutely would.
So is that the advice you would give to others who want to get into the music business?
Absolutely. My advice to people who are, like young bands and songwriters is to get out there and perform as much as possible. I think that's the real magic of music. I think it's lost on a lot of young performers who have the idea that what they need to do is rehearse. The way you get good is to perform. And the way you get to be a good songwriter is not to rewrite the same 5 songs over and over to make them better. You've got to write first drafts of 100 songs.
And maybe aim your drumsticks well.
Don't do what I did and hit some poor woman in the 10th row in the face with my drumsticks. That's what happens when you think you're a bigger star than you actually are.
Jacob Slichter is 62 now. He and Semisonic still perform publicly. Now you can get a copy of So You Want to Be a Rock and Roll Star by Jacob Slichter by tapping the link in our show notes or by going to our website, heardeverything.com. We may earn an Amazon commission if you make a purchase. While you're at heardeverything.com, be sure and listen to my 1998 interview with someone else who knows a bit about the ins and outs of the rock and roll industry, Darlene Love.
They thought of me as being one of the greatest background singers there was. So to be able to be on their records, they was like wonderful. I mean, they respected me for the talent that I had.
And my 1987 conversation with the man who was the press agent for a little band from England you may have heard of who found out their own way about the music industry, the Beatles, Derek Taylor.
It wasn't only the music, was it? It was something beyond that.
There was something magical about them.
That's right. There was something beyond all precedent and experience, and it really hasn't been succeeded.
And of course, we post new episodes of Now I've Heard Everything every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and you can find us everywhere you listen to podcasts. And thank you so much for listening. Next time on Now I've Heard Everything, from an early age, she became an activist trying to make a better life for African American people everywhere. My 1999 conversation with activist, author, hip-hop artist, Sister Souljah.
And I've dedicated my life primarily to being able to help African people to get in control of their lives, their political lives, their economic lives, their social and spiritual lives.
That's next time on Now I've Heard Everything. I'm Bill Thompson. Jacob Slichter.